Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
The music industry has changed substantially over the past several years and will likely continue to change for many years to come. We have someone on the show today that's going to help us do that. He's a graduate of USC's Thornton School of Music, where he received his Bachelor's of Science degree in music industry. He then went ahead and attended Southwestern Law School, where he focused his studies on entertainment. His first job in the industry was as an artist manager for his brother's band. We're going to talk about that wild ride he took at 4 o'clock in the morning in Wyoming in a blizzard. Probably be one of the things we're going to chat about here. And he's gone on to negotiate deals for both independent artists and multi-million-dollar agreements. Kamal Moo's with us. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Glad to have you here. The book you have written, and I spent some time and sat down to go through this, The Straightforward Guide to the Music Business. I got to tell you, if I was an artist, an aspiring musician, singer-songwriter, producer, manager, whatever, this is the book that should be in your gig bag at all times. And we're going to definitely talk about that. Let's go back to the very beginning. You started out, from what I read, you started loving music in your teenage years, early days, and you originally thought you wanted to be a producer, but that changed.
Right. I realized I didn't have the talent to be a producer. I love music. I'm okay. I could play a little bit of keyboard, but over time I realized, I just didn't have the skill set to really be a record producer. So then I shifted my focus to the business side and the legal side.
Was it something that you found interesting? Because not everybody's cut out to be an entertainment lawyer. It does take a special breed. Did you have that? Kind of like what a CPA's got with an analytical mind when it comes to ones and twos. Did you just find that niche as being an attorney, and then, of course, that leading on to entertainment law?
I think so. I've always been a really strong writer, did well in school, especially in English, so I was really good at expressing myself, and I think it was just a natural fit for me. I just, had a good mind for it, and just kind of, it was a good fit to marry my love of music with my abilities and, put it together.
Among many other things, from what I understand, looking at your book, not only did you go skydiving as a freshman in college, which, right, God bless you, because you couldn't, you'll never get me to jump out of a perfectly good plane. You were also a contestant on the TV show Jeopardy!
I was, yeah. And actually my episode just aired on, was it September 30th, a little couple months ago. So I got to be on there when Alex was still the host, of course. And it was quite an experience.
How'd you do?
I didn't win. I didn't win. It was tough. I did okay, but the guy I was up against was just really good. So I just, didn't stand a chance.
And of course, then also I read in your book that you wrote and produced a low-budget comedy horror feature film. So in other words, you've just done a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I have a lot of different interests. So it's not just law. I have other artistic endeavors and other endeavors that I work on.
But you started out managing your brother's band, right?
Yep.
They got a record deal, from what I take, and you helped negotiate that deal, and then you went out on the road basically managing them and handling their day-to-days, which is what put you in Wyoming at 4 o'clock in the morning in a snowstorm.
Correct, yeah. No, my brother's band, they got really big on MySpace, back in the day when MySpace was huge. This was back in 2007, I believe, yeah, and they did a cover of a hip-hop song, like a screamo rock version, and it was getting 50,000 plays a day. It really took off. MySpace was kind of suspicious. They thought that we were using bots or something to inflate the plays artificially, but it just turns out it was just really popular. So they kept on deleting the page. And they were about to give up, and I said, let me manage you. Let me jump in here and manage you guys and help out. And so I got in touch with MySpace. I got the page back, and then offers started coming in from record labels. And then they ended up signing a deal, recorded an album soon after that, and went on tour. It was quite a whirlwind. It really went by really quickly.
That led to you becoming what you are today, which is, and I'm going to preface that by saying you're that entertainment lawyer that's not just an entertainment lawyer. You've had the opportunity and wherewithal to manage an act, which a lot of entertainment lawyers don't do. They're a lawyer and that's it. But you've seen it from the artist end of things too.
Yeah, that's true. That's one advantage that I have. I think I know how to speak to artists. I know what their concerns are. I've been out there. Like I said, I've sold merch. I've driven the tour van. I've done everything. So I have a unique perspective. So when a contract comes around, in theory, something would look good on paper, but then it doesn't always play out the way you'd think it would in the real world. So that real world experience has served me really well. And it's been, my clients have definitely benefited from that, I think. And I think I always say that, a lot of lawyers do the deal and walk away, but I did the deal and lived with it for years as a manager. So, the practicalities I'm really familiar with that side of it.
And that gives you a different perspective on the day-to-day too, because you are now one of those guys that's been out there in the trenches.
Correct, yeah.
So let's talk about this for a minute. I always tell people who ask me, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, manager or lawyer, which should they have first?
That's a good question. I always say, you'll get a manager, you'll get a lawyer, you'll get an agent when you need one. So by that, I mean, for example, if you're ever presented with a contract that concerns your music, definitely get a lawyer. That's the time to get a lawyer. Because if it's a publishing deal, a record deal, anything like that, get a lawyer. For a manager, I always say the best time to get a manager is when you have something to manage. You have some kind of spark that sort of, led to something else. For example, I used to manage a hip hop violinist, and he had a little bit of traction, but then I kind of worked with him, and then we made him a music video, and then the music video just really blew up on YouTube, and then he got booked on Ellen DeGeneres to go play on her show, and just then it really took off from there. But you kind of have to have that spark that a manager can come in and sort of help pour the gasoline on, so to speak, So I always say that, people think, if I just had a manager, they'll make my career and they'll take me from nothing. And that doesn't happen a whole lot. I mean, sometimes, but, a lot of times you have to sort of do that work yourself, get at least a minimum level of something going, and then a manager can come in. So that's the best time to get a manager, in my opinion.
When it comes to negotiating the record deal, that's what a lot of artists are striving for, is to get that record deal, whether it's with an indie label or a major label. They're still better off, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but they're still better off with an attorney to get through all that than a manager, right?
It depends. I feel like in that case, definitely an attorney is essential. Whereas, I mean, you don't need a manager to, get you through that deal. But, I mean, sometimes if they have savvy and they've got good connections, a good manager can help. But definitely you're going to need an attorney in any case. I think if you go into negotiating a deal without an attorney, you're really putting yourself at risk.
Can an attorney also be a manager these days, legally or ethically?
They can. There are some attorneys who manage. Well, it just has to be clearly defined. When you hire an attorney, usually you sign what's called a retainer agreement or an engagement letter that kind of lays out the terms of the relationship. If you're going to offer management services as well, you have to really clearly define that relationship to make sure there's no conflicts of interest or, any other legal issues. But, there are attorneys who do manage. I don't manage anymore. There are attorneys out there who'll do that.
But that's something that the artist, if that's the path they're going to take, where it's a manager/attorney arrangement, they need to know that there should be a separation of church and state, so to speak, in that relationship.
Right, because attorneys were governed by really strict ethical rules, so we have to be very careful with the way we deal with our clients. Whenever you're entering into a business relationship with your client, that's not like a legal relationship, legal representation relationship, you have to think about the ethical implications of that, because then you're looking out for your own interests as a lawyer, as a business entity, and you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to put your own interests above the client's. So it gets a little bit tricky. You have to be careful when structuring that relationship. We're
going to take a break and get a word in for one of our sponsors. When we come back, we're going to talk about the straightforward guide to the music biz that is written by Kamal Moo here. It's an entertainment lawyer's perspective of breaking down the industry. And we're not going to go through chapter by chapter because there's just a lot but this book pretty much covers everything. So we're going to chat about that when we come back.
Hi, everybody. This is John Barry, and I'd love to wish you and your family a Merry, Merry Christmas.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Hi everyone, I'm Larry Butler, and I want to send you a free digital copy of my new book, The Singer-Songwriter Rulebook, 101 Ways to Help You Improve Your Chances of Success. That's right, everything you need to know to launch your career as a singer-songwriter, all based on my 40 years in the live performance arena, and believe me, I've seen it all. In my book, you'll find the 10 things you have to deal with before even thinking about becoming a singer-songwriter performer. You'll also learn about the 5 things every singer-songwriter can do this weekend to make their live show better. 5 things I can guarantee that you are not doing already. Plus, there's tips on songwriting and staging, photo and video shoots, publishing, merch, dozens of other topics. All written for people who don't particularly like to read. And again, it's free. Just go to the Business Side of Music website homepage and look for my book cover. Click on it, and a free digital copy of my book will be yours. I'm Larry Butler, and I approve of this message.
Are you curious about Gordon Lightfoot's songwriting process, or what it was like working with Prince in the 80s? Have you ever given any thought to what goes into a golf course design or writing a book? I'm Steve Waxman, the host of The Creationist, a podcast about people who create. Each episode features a different creator sharing stories that I hope will inspire your own creativity. The Creationist is available now on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio, Kamal Moo is joining us today from Los Angeles, California. He's an entertainment lawyer who is also the author of The Straightforward Guide to the Music Biz. An entertainment lawyer breaks down the industry. You go through this book. Is there anything you don't cover in here? Because when I start looking at some of the chapters, I'm a songwriter, now what? I want to start my own indie record label. I'm a record producer. You pretty much can cover the entire gamut. Are these chapters that you have written, are they based on things you've had to lay your hands on personally?
Oh yeah, the reason I was inspired to write the book was because I feel like half of my job is explaining the law and the industry to my clients, and because a lot of them, they're creatives, they don't think about the legal side, the business side, really, they're not as well versed in that. So I've explained the concepts in the book many, many, many times over and over again. That's why when I wrote it, it was a quick book for me to just sit down and just churn out, because I've just been through these topics so many times. So that's why it's written the way it is. It's very conversational. I wanted to come across like your friend is just explaining something to you. I always say, I always tell people that I realize that in the music business, you don't just want a lawyer, you want a friend who happens to be a lawyer. And I run into that a lot, where a lot of my clients say, oh, you're so easy to talk to. You explain things to me, you don't make me feel stupid. And I'm like, well, that's not my job. You shouldn't understand these things. So that's why I kind of structured the book the way it is. I mean, it's just the most common issues I've run across. So, for example, when I talk in the songwriting, in the songwriting chapter, I just talk about 3 main sources of income. I mean, there are other sources of income. There's sheet music and grand rights like theater licensing, but out of hundreds of clients, maybe 2 have had to deal with that issue. So I tried to keep it focused on the typical musician out there, what they're going to run into, and the issues, not so much the esoteric stuff.
And this is really more, I would assume, more as a primer when you start putting things together. I mean, chapter 3, I'm starting a band, now what? And we've all done this. We've had a band. It's a bunch of us get together and we practice in the garage or mom and dad's basement, or if we're lucky enough, in a studio. But we don't think about things like putting together a general partnership, or who should make the decision, or who owns the band's property, because there are those things. And you go through that in this book, clearly explaining that it's more than just a bunch of people getting together and playing music.
I think, too, I always tell people, figure this stuff out in the beginning, because once money and success become involved, it's a nightmare. I always say it's like trying to unscramble an egg at that point. It's just, you can't do it, because then people have their relationships are strained a little bit. They've got resentment issues probably. There's a lot of different things going on at that point. And then money starts coming in. It gets really messy sometimes. So I always tell bands, you don't have to necessarily do it right away, but if you see yourself starting to take this more seriously and like really become a band, you're going to go play gigs, you're going to start writing a lot of music together, take the time, get a good lawyer, and just try and figure this stuff out. It doesn't have to be anything super fancy. It can be a simple, straightforward partnership agreement. but just so the rules are kind of set in the beginning and you don't have to deal with it later.
I think one of my favorite stories is the group that was huge in the 70s and the 80s, Little River Band. It turns out that as a band, they never trademarked their name, if I remember the story correctly. It wasn't even a band member. I think it was a roadie or a side musician or a gun for hire that went ahead and trademarked the name. So the original members can't even go out and tour anymore as Little River Band because this guy owns the rights to it now. Those are perils and pitfalls that you have to make sure. Doesn't seem like it's going to happen, but inevitably it's going to.
Right, yeah, it's definitely good to protect yourself. And I always say, when you record your material, copyright your material, register it for copyright protection. That costs money, but it's worth it. I always say too, like, these are just issues that no one wants to think about. I mean, people, like you said, they just want to get together and make music. They're not trying to think about like, the legal ramifications of not doing this and that. I think that's what this book is for, just for those kind of musicians, just to have an idea of what they need to be aware of. I mean, definitely, like I said, find a good lawyer if you get to that point where you need a lawyer, but at least this gives you, like you said, a primer introduction so you'll know what to look out for, the issues to really just be aware of.
And when we talk about copywriting, it's not really an overly difficult process. I've gone in and copyrighted material before, and it's 15, 20 minutes online through the copyright office. Is that the best place to do it, is just go directly to the government when you copyright a song, or should you go through a service or hire someone to do it? Or copywriting, where do you go with it? I've written a song, I want to protect it. Is that where I go with it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the best way to protect your music is to copyright it, file for copyright protection. Like you said, it's a pretty straightforward process. It can get a little bit confusing for some people, and I understand that. That's why some clients just say, hey, I don't want to deal with this. You deal with it. So that's fine. But it's definitely, it's not that hard. You just have to spend like an afternoon and really research the website and see how to upload. For example, you just have to upload an MP3 after you fill out a certain form and then pay the fee. Then you have to wait several months for a certificate to come back, but the certificate will be effective on the date that you actually uploaded everything, so it's retroactive. The one thing I'll say also is that, technically speaking, you own the copyright in a work as soon as you create it. However, if you ever need to sue somebody for copyright infringement, you need that registration. So that's the purpose of having it registered, to have, proof that you actually did create it and that you have, proof of registration.
Okay, so I've asked this question before. We've had an entertainment lawyer on in the past couple of years ago. This bears asking again, what we call the poor man's copyright, where you mail the lyrics and maybe an MP3 file or a thumb drive file to yourself in an envelope with the postmark. Is that legal and binding, or will that just help you, or where does that play in all of this?
So, I don't do litigation. I just do transactional contract drafting. However, I've never heard of anybody really succeeding in a court case that way, or like using that, there's a dramatic moment where they open it up. The best thing to do is just to spend the money and copyright, your music properly, especially if you're going to release it, especially really if you're going to put it out on Spotify or Apple Music, just, register it beforehand, because I think it's worth it. It's really worth it. So that's the best way to do it.
You have a couple chapters that really maybe tie together, which is Chapter 4, I just got offered a record deal, and Chapter 5, I want to start my own indie label. Mm-hmm. As an independent artist today, are you better off getting a record deal out there with someone that's established, or does it make sense to take that risk and create that boutique indie label that is going to represent you well because it's you?
Well, I always say that to the extent that you can accomplish things yourself, I'd say do that. Honestly, I tell my clients, I'm like, a lot of my clients are independent artists and they don't need a record label, and they're doing it themselves and they're successful and they're making money. And I said, go as far as you can on your own. And then when you get to a point where it'd be beneficial to have a label partner, then do a deal. But then you have leverage, then you have, a better position to make a deal, because then it's less of a financial risk for the label. So it's really about timing. And I have other clients who just don't want the creative restraints that a label is going to put on them. They just want to do whatever they want to do. So that's another thing. So a label isn't necessarily like they used to be in the old days, where like you had to have a label to get your music out there. Now everybody can put their music out. However, there are benefits to a label. For example, they have a marketing apparatus, that you're not going to have. They're going to be able to get your music in front of more people, maybe get you on certain playlists on Spotify, certain things like that. So there's definitely, some benefits there, but I don't think that it's necessary. It's not necessary to launch a career like it used to be.
Let's maybe take that a step further. And when we talk about when we talk about the record labels, yeah, they will help get you that radio play. They'll get you on those Spotify playlists. Are you better off with an indie label, or are you better off if you can get a major deal?
Just it depends on who you are. It depends on the kind of artist you are, right? So if you're like a folk singer, for example, you might be better off with an indie label because that's a little bit more niche market than, say like, a mainstream artist. So it really depends on sort of your needs and your audience. For example, my brother's band, they were a screamo rock band from Miami, so that's not going to have a wide appeal, but it had a solid audience, and that's why it made sense for them to sign with an independent record label. So it really depends on who you are and what you need, I think. And also you have to understand, you have to think about, is the label going to really get what you're trying to do and really go along with that? I say, one thing I tell all my clients is, look, the contract says what it says, but ultimately, it's the quality of people you're dealing with, and are they going to honor your artistic vision and where you want to take your music and be supportive of that, or are they going to try and take you and shove you in another direction that you don't want to go in? That's something to consider, too. There's a lot of pros and cons you have to weigh out there.
We're going to take another break, get another word in for another one of our sponsors. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about something that's near and dear to my heart, which is Chapter 7, I want to go on tour, now what? And I love how you've broken that down. We've got in the studio today Kamal Moo, who is the author of The Straightforward Guide to the Music Biz, an entertainment lawyer breaks down the industry.
You're listening to the business side of music.
My name is Garrett Hope. I am a composer, coach, podcaster, and speaker. I've been focused on building my music business since the early 2000s and helping others build their music businesses since 2015. I want to tell you about a free event I'm organizing for January. It's called the Ultimate Music Business Summit. It'll take place January 7, 8, and 9. Here's the deal. Through the summit, I want to help you build your own stimulus package for 2021. There will be over 21 teachers giving over 21 high-leverage business lessons you can use in your music business immediately so you can make 2021 the best year for your music ever. If you want to make more money with your music, grow your audience, or impact more people, this summit is for you. More than that, there will be a few live panel discussions so we can discuss this in real time. It's going to be amazing. And yes, it's free. This summit will give you real-world, not theoretical, strategies you can implement immediately. I promise you, with all the teachers lined up, you'll get something you've never thought of before. Even though building a business is hard, and trust me, no one is promising it's easy, it is possible. You just need the right tools and strategies. Get your free ticket today and reserve your spot in the summit. Build your own stimulus package for 2021. I look forward to seeing you at the summit. Go to musicsummit.biz, that's musicsummit.biz, to get your ticket today.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio, Kamal Moo is with us from Los Angeles, California, an entertainment lawyer who has written the book, The Straightforward Guide to the Music Biz. We're going to take a look at Chapter 7. I wish I'd had this back in the day when I first started. I want to go on tour, now what? And you have this broken down step by step by step by step. And I read a thing a while back where it said that, okay, the artist goes out and makes all this large sum of money on the road touring. What they don't understand is there's also a large sum of money going out to pay for this tour to happen. You really cover a lot of that in here on not only, the venues and the load-ins and the tech writers and the sound checks, but you start getting into things that a lot of people don't think about, like overages, whether I need to hire a tour manager. I love your one page. Where will I sleep on tour? I don't know, in the van maybe. I mean, we've all done that in the past. This is really in-depth. Is this something you learned because you were traveling with your brother at the time, or did you pick this up working with other clients?
A lot of that is firsthand knowledge. Honestly, yeah, we were out there. I mean, I did a few tours with them, and it was brutal. It was in the winter time, too, so we were driving all over the country. And, yeah, the load-ins and just setting up. And, one venue didn't have heat one time, so it was freezing in there. It's a grind. And tour is hard. It's a hard life, and it's like one thing after another for like 2 months. It was a great experience, and I enjoyed it, but it was hard work. And I think that a lot of musicians think of, I kind of mentioned in the book, people think of Almost Famous and the romanticized version of the touring, of what that's like. But really, it's a grind. It can be a real grind. and it's hard, and to stay healthy and just eat properly, and it's tough. It's a tough thing.
And also determining at one point, do I need a road manager or a tour manager? Do I need to carry a merch guy with me? So you cover all that in this book.
Right, because at some point, you might hit that point where you just need those people. I mean, a good tour manager really will save your bacon, because they'll get out there and make sure you get paid. And, your actual, like my brother's band, at some point I couldn't go out and tour with them anymore. I had other things going on. And so I had to hire them a tour manager. And he was a real lifesaver. Talking about your book, one of the things that we have not talked about yet, and that is the booking agent. We talked about that somewhat, I don't want to say pecking order, and I've got friends that are artist managers who do an amazing job. And they'll tell you, look, you have to have something to manage in order to have a manager, where an attorney is, if you're starting to getting into some contractual issues, that's where the attorney falls into place. The agent, is the agent... And everybody wants that agent. Everybody wants to go, well, I need a booking agent. I need someone to book me. It's kind of like, well, I need a manager to manage me. You have to go out and find your own gigs up to a certain point before an agent will be interested. Yeah, I mean, it's a business proposition, right? I mean, an agent is only going to really take you on if people are going to pay to come see you perform, right? So, for example, my brother's band got signed, then we got a solid, rock agent, because he knew that, of course, the label was going to release the record, promote the record, so people were going to come see them perform. So it just made sense, to do that. But to kind of pluck a band who has no label, no support, nothing going on, it's like, well, there's no opportunity there, really. So you have to sort of, like you said, build your sort of following, and then sort of establish yourself a little bit first before an agent will then take you to the next level and say, okay, I can get you as an opener for this band or that artist. And then it just kind of makes sense from there. Now, some things I've seen over the years is non-exclusivity with an agent, where an artist, and I see this more with kind of the classic rock acts or the classic country acts, where they will have maybe 3 or 4 different booking agencies representing them. Does that make sense, or should you just build a relationship with one agent for a certain period of time and hope that all works out? It depends. If you're going to have multiple agents, it has to make sense to carve up your representation that way. So, for example, let's say you have a booking agent for Europe, and then you have one for North America, then you have one for Asia. That makes sense because they know those territories and they can get you, gigs there. But if there's overlap, then that could get a little bit tricky unless the agents have an agreement amongst themselves, like, okay, well, we'll split the commissions this way. And because then it's like, oh, then one will say, well, I got you that gig over there. But then the other will say, no, I helped get, so it's going to get messy. So to the extent possible, you're going to want to limit that and just have one agent who takes care of all your bookings. But like I said, if it makes sense, like by territory, then, you could divide that up. And how do you go about finding that agent that makes the most sense? I mean, honestly, they'll come to you when the time is right because you'll kind of catch their attention. I always say you need the right agent for the right genre. So, for example, if you're a rock band, an agent who books jazz festivals isn't really going to do much for you. So you have to sort of know the market and who's booking who, and look at the bands that you like and the artists that you like, and who represents them. That's always important because then you can sort of maybe reach out to them. Like I said, in any of these cases, it's always the best case scenario when you get approached. Like when my brother's band was getting really big, they were getting left and right, like inquiries from labels and agents and all that. So that's really the best situation to be in, because to try and get their interest, I mean, they're really busy people. So like, they're not going to really sit there and want to talk to you and listen to your demo and all this stuff and believe in you from nothing. I mean, they're trying to make a living too. When it comes to the recording studio, and we're kind of jumping around here, but it's another chapter in your book, and you break this down into finding the right studio, finding the right producer, the session players, the music for hire. I think that's another area where a lot of artists going in don't really understand that there's a lot of moving components there, and you can really get screwed around if you don't have yourself protected in all of those areas. Right, because so there's a concept in the law where, for example, you can own the copyright in a sound recording. That's what record labels do. They create sound recordings. So the default view of the law is that if 2 or more people create a sound recording, for example, they're equal owners. So let's say you have a guitarist come in and a bongo player and a background vocalist, and they all perform on the recording. Technically, they're all equal co-owners with you. So it's important for them to sign work for hire agreements, which basically they're turning over their rights in the recording to you as the artist or as the label. And that's important because, the worst thing is, you put out a record, it becomes a huge hit, and then all these people just come around saying, well, I own part of that because I didn't sign over my rights. So it's important to think about that stuff.
And who would normally think about that the first time out? I mean, you would, I paid them X number of dollars to record and we're good. But they really need to sign a work for hire agreement or musician for hire agreement.
They should, yeah, because you can't do it orally. It has to be in writing. So, it all has to get done. And I think that's why I always say it's worth it to spend a little bit of money with a lawyer to get the contracts you need in place before you release any music. I work with a lot of indie artists. I know budgeting is tight sometimes, so I'll always find a way to work with them and make it happen because I'm of the opinion I want to build long-term relationships with clients. I don't want to just, get all the money I can out of one deal. So I definitely try and make sure they're protected and walk them through all this. And that's why I said, that's why I wrote the book, because I feel like a lot of these questions keep coming up over and over again.
Let's talk about the book for a minute, The Straightforward Guide to the Music Biz. How can someone find this? And as I said at the beginning of the show, this is something that should be in everybody's gig bag. How can people get a copy of it?
Oh, well, I appreciate that. So it's on Amazon right now in paperback form. The ebook gets released on Monday the 16th. So, it'll be available Apple, Kindle, Kobo, all the major outlets, but the paperback is out right now on Amazon.
And that's 16th of November.
Correct, yes.
Good, gotcha. And how can people find you?
So I have an author website set up. It's kamalandrew.com, KAMALANDREW.com. And then also my law website is kamalmoo.com, KAMALMOO.com. It actually redirects to my old website I had with my ex-partner, but, you can still contact me through there.
Very good. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Busan.
Snow, choir singing soft and low on my old red radio. Christmas memories, bubble lights upon the tree, shining bright for all to see. Setting up the old nativity, Christmas memories. Church bells ringing Christmas Eve, Silent Night sung by Jim Reeves, Charlie Brown on black and white TV, Christmas memories. Dropping by for Christmas memories. Christmas Day will come and go, years fly by and children grow. Some things change, but some things don't. Those Christmas memories, those Christmas memories.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.